Prague is drowning tonight. The Vltava has swollen past its stone banks, swallowed the cobblestones whole, and turned the ancient streets into dark rivers that reflect nothing but rain. It is November 1911, and this is the worst storm anyone in this city can remember. But inside the Zlata Skena, the golden stage, the chandeliers burn as bright as ever, and 800 souls sit pressed together in their velvet seats, breathing the same warm air perfumed with candle wax and anticipation. Outside, the world dissolves. In here, it is the last act of the season. The last act, it will turn out, of many things. The opera is called The Nightingale's Vow. It has played to full houses for 3 months, and tonight, flooded streets, thunder and all, there is not an empty seat in the house. The audience does not yet know that the woman they came to hear will never take the stage again. High above the pit, a chandelier trembles. Thunder rolls across the city like something old and angry, and the candle flames shiver in their glass housings all at once, as if they already know. In the wings backstage, the world is a different kind of theatre entirely. Dominik Cerny, the theatre owner, paces the corridor outside the dressing rooms with a handkerchief pressed to his forehead, speaking very fast and quietly to himself. The opera house is mortgaged to its eaves. Tonight's box office receipts are the only thing standing between him and ruin. He has gambled everything on Vera Kasparova's voice. In box 7, as always, sits Baron Albrecht von Haas. He has been to every performance, 31 nights in total, and has spoken to no one. He watches the empty stage with his opera glasses raised, patient as a man waiting for something he is absolutely certain will come. Down in the orchestra pit, Jan Horak draws his bow across the strings of his cello and thinks about the letter he found this morning. A letter in Vera's handwriting, addressed to someone else entirely. His jaw is tight. His eyes keep moving to the door that leads backstage. In the wings, young Eliska Novak stands in her ivory understudy dress and watches through a gap in the curtain as the audience settles. Her lips move slightly, silently rehearsing every word of a role she has never been allowed to sing. And in his cramped seat, near the back of the stalls, Otto Kral clutches his leather scorebook and stares at the stage with 12 years of love written plainly across his face. He has no idea yet what the night will take from him. At 9:07, a stagehand named Peter goes to call Vera Kasparova for her entrance. The final act is 2 minutes away. He knocks twice on her dressing room door. No answer. He knocks again. He tells himself she always ignores the first knock. He tells himself she is touching up her powder or warming her voice, or simply being difficult in the way that great sopranos are permitted to be. He opens the door. The room smells of gardenias and something else. Something metallic and wrong. The gas lamp on the vanity is burning low, painting everything the color of old gold. Vera Kasparova is seated at her dressing table as if she simply leaned forward and rested. But her head is tilted at an angle that heads do not tilt in rest, and coiled around her throat, knotted with terrible efficiency, is a length of deep crimson velvet. A curtain cord, cut from the backstage drape with something sharp, looped twice and pulled. Peter makes a sound that brings 3 people running. On stage, the conductor raises his baton for the final act. In the pit, the musicians look at one another, confused, as the curtain fails to rise. And outside, the rain comes down harder still, sealing every exit, swallowing every escape. The golden stage has become something else now. It has become a room with no way out, and a murderer already inside it. Inspector Vaclav Novotny had come to the opera for his wedding anniversary. He had not come to work. But when Dominik Cerny burst into the stalls crying murder, it was Novotny who stood up, smoothed his jacket, and took charge, quietly, without drama, as was his way. He sent a boy to telephone the police station, though the lines were already down from the storm. He confirmed what he already suspected: no one was leaving. The flooded streets outside were impassable. The opera house had 8 exits, and every last one of them opened onto water black as ink. 800 people, 1 body, 1 killer. Novotny stood in the doorway of Vera's dressing room and took his time. He noted the position of the body. He noted the curtain cord, crimson, velvet, cut cleanly from the stage left drape. and the way it had been knotted, not looped carelessly, but tied with knowledge and intention. He noted that the dressing room door had no lock. He noted 3 things on the vanity table that he filed away carefully in the steel trap of his mind and said nothing about. Then he turned to the pale, sweating figure of Dominik Cerny and said in a voice like quiet gravel, "I will need to speak with everyone who had access to this corridor. Beginning now." Novotny assembled the principal suspects in the green room, a cramped, velvet-choked parlor backstage that smelled of rosin and cold coffee. He watched them the way he always watched suspects in the first minutes, not listening to what they said, but watching what they did with their hands. Eliska Novak sat very straight and spoke with careful precision. She said she had been in the wings the entire evening. She said she and Vera had, yes, disagreed. Artistic differences, nothing more. Her hands, Novotny noticed, were perfectly still. Practiced stillness, he thought. Otto Kral said he had spent the interval in the composer's gallery above the stage. He had been revising a passage in the score. He could not have left without someone seeing him. He pressed the leather scorebook to his chest as he spoke, and his voice cracked twice on Vera's name. Jan Horak said almost nothing at all. He sat with his hands between his knees and stared at the floor with the eyes of a man working through a grief he cannot yet fully look at. When Novotny asked him to describe his relationship with the soprano, he said simply, "She was a colleague." The pause before the word was 3 seconds long. Novotny counted. Dominik Cerny talked without stopping, the way that frightened men do, filling silence with noise so that no one can hear them thinking. And Baron von Haas sat entirely apart from the others, his white-gloved hands folded over his cane, and said nothing at all until Novotny addressed him directly. Then he smiled, just slightly, and said, "I think you already know more than you are saying, Inspector, as do I." Novotny returned to the dressing room alone. This was always when the real conversation began, the one between the inspector and the room itself. The vanity table told him several things. First, Vera's evening gloves were laid out with deliberate neatness on the left side of the table, as though she had removed them and set them aside before her visitor arrived, suggesting she had known who was coming and had not been afraid. Second, the small locked jewel box on the right side of the table was open and the lock had not been forced. Someone had a key. The box was empty, though a jeweler's impression in the velvet lining told Novotny something had been stored there recently. A ring, perhaps. Or a locket. Third, tucked beneath the vanity's lip, where it had slid and nearly escaped notice entirely, was a small folded note. The paper was expensive, heavy stock, cream-colored. The handwriting was angular and precise. It read only, "I cannot allow tonight to proceed. You know what you promised me. If you sing, everything is finished for us both." There was no signature, but the note had not been sent. It had been delivered by hand, which meant whoever wrote it had been here, in this room, before the murder. Novotny folded the note into his breast pocket and stood very still for a moment, listening to the rain hammer the small window above the vanity. Then he went to look at the curtain cord more closely. It had been cut from the stage-left drape with something thin and sharp. A penknife, perhaps. Or embroidery scissors, the sort a musician might use to trim the end of a rosin-caked bowstring. It was the stagehand Peter who told Novotny about Jan Horak. Not maliciously, Peter was a simple young man who answered questions literally and completely, which Novotny appreciated. Peter said that he had seen Jan Horak emerge from the corridor near Vera's dressing room at approximately 8:45, 15 minutes before the body was discovered. He was certain of the time because the interval bell had just rung. Horak had been straightening his cuffs as he walked. He had not looked at Peter. Novotny brought Horak back to the green room alone. He set the cello case on the table between them and he asked Horak to open it. Inside, beneath the neck of the instrument, nestled in the red silk lining, was a letter in Vera's handwriting. A love letter, tender and specific, dated 8 months ago. And beneath that, a second letter, more recent, dated 3 days ago. In this one, Vera's voice was different, cooler. She told Jan that it was over. She told him she had made a decision that would change everything, and that he should not come to her tonight, regardless of what he had heard. He should trust her. She was sorry. Horak said he had been in her dressing room that evening. He admitted it. He said they had argued. He said she had asked him to leave. He said he left. He said she was alive when he closed the door, and his voice, when he said it, was the voice of a man telling the truth about something that is going to destroy him anyway. Novotny believed him, but he kept the letters, and he noticed as Horak latched the cello case that there was nothing sharp inside it. No penknife, no scissors. He filed this away. Dominik Cerny, when pressed, became a different man entirely. The bluster fell away, and what was left underneath was raw and frightened. He told Novotny everything about the debt, 200,000 crowns owed to men who did not wait politely. He said Vera had been threatening to leave the company. She had received an offer from Vienna, a permanent position with the state opera. If she left, the season was finished, and so was he. He had begged her to stay. He said she had laughed at him. He said he had told her she had no idea what she was doing to him, and she had turned back to her mirror and said that was rather his problem, wasn't it? Cerny's hands were shaking by the time he finished. He said he had been in the lobby during the interval, speaking with the front-of-house manager about the flooding. There were witnesses, 7 of them, who had all spoken with him at various points during that 30-minute window. Novotny thanked him and watched him leave, shoulders bent, dabbing at his forehead. He was guilty of desperation and of cowardice, and perhaps of many things. But the motive that seemed largest and loudest was also, Novotny reflected, the most obviously performed. The truly guilty, in his experience, rarely volunteered quite so much reason to suspect them. He circled Cerny's name in his notebook and drew a small question mark beside it. Then he went to find Baron von Haas. Baron von Haas had returned to box 7. He was sitting in the dark with the opera house empty below him, 800 confused and frightened audience members having been ushered to the lobbies and foyers. And he was looking at the unlit stage with an expression that Novotny could not immediately name. Novotny sat beside him without being invited. For a long moment, neither man spoke. The rain filled the silence. Then Novotny said, 31 performances, Baron. That is not devotion to music. That is devotion to a person. Von Haas was quiet. Then, she was my daughter. The word sat between them like a stone dropped into still water. He said it without drama, which made it worse. He said Vera Kasparova had been born to a woman he had loved briefly and badly in his youth, and surrendered to an orphanage in the winter of 1877. And he had spent 30 years finding her, and then another 4 years working up the courage to come close. He had never spoken to her. He had sat in box 7 and watched her sing and told himself that this proximity, this witnessing of her brilliance, was enough. He had recently written her a letter revealing the truth of who he was. She had written back. He produced the letter from his coat. Novotny read it. Vera's voice on the page was cautious, but not unkind. She had asked for time. She had said she needed to think. She had said that after tonight's performance, she would meet him finally, properly, in the lobby. Von Haas folded the letter away and looked at the empty stage and said nothing more. He had come tonight to meet his daughter for the first time. He had sat in box 7 while someone killed her. His alibi was the entire audience of box 7, 6 other patrons who had seen him seated, motionless, for the full duration of the interval. Novotny sat with him for another minute before he rose. He had what he needed now. All the pieces were in the right places. He just had to look at the one he had been avoiding. Novotny found Otto Kral in the composer's gallery, still seated at his small desk above the empty stage, a pen in his ink-stained hand, the leather scorebook open before him. He was writing. He did not stop when Novotny entered. Novotny sat and waited. At last Kral set the pen down. Novotny placed 3 things on the desk between them. The cream-colored note from beneath the vanity, a small pair of embroidery scissors from Kral's coat pocket, which Novotny had taken, very quietly, during the initial interview in the green room, and from his own memory, spoken aloud, the fact that the jewel box in Vera's dressing room had been opened without force, and that Vera had owned only one piece of jewelry valuable enough to be locked away. A locket containing a portrait of a man she had told Jan Horak was no one important. A man with ink-stained hands and 12 years of letters sent, and 12 years of letters never answered. Kral looked at the 3 things. Then he looked at Novotny. He said she was going to Vienna. She was going to take everything I wrote, my music, my life, and sing it for another city and another audience and never think of me again. I went to tell her she could not, that I would not allow it, that if she left, I would tell everyone what the opera really was, what I had written into it, every secret she had ever told me. She had given me everything she was, in confidence, and I had put it all into the music, the whole of her private self, and she laughed at me. She said no one would ever believe a man like me. He paused. I did not plan it. I want you to know that. I did not go to that room with the intention of… He stopped. He looked at his hands. The cord was simply there. Novotny said nothing. There was nothing to say. Below them, the empty stage sat in its amber light, the props and painted scenery of the Nightingale's Vow waiting for a final act that would never come. By the time the waters began to recede, it was past 3 in the morning. Otto Kral was taken away quietly through the stage door, into what remained of the night. The audience had long since dispersed to lobbies and waiting rooms, drinking cold tea and speaking in low voices with the particular hushed confusion of people who came for one kind of story and received another entirely. Eliska Novak was the last to leave the wings. She stood for a long time at the edge of the stage, looking out at the empty house. Someone had left a single lamp burning in the footlights. She did not sing. She simply stood there in her ivory dress in the amber light, and then she turned and walked into the dark, and the lamp went out behind her as though it had been waiting for permission. Jan Horak took his cello and his letters home through wet streets still gleaming with the night's rain. He did not look back at the opera house. Baron von Haas sat alone in box 7 until Novotny asked him gently to leave. He rose with the deliberate dignity of a man who has learned to carry everything privately, and he walked out without looking at the stage, and the door of box 7 swung shut behind him with a sound like a note held one beat too long. Dominik Cerny would declare bankruptcy within the month. The Zlata Scena, the golden stage, would close its doors by spring, sold to a textile merchant who had no use for the Baroque plasterwork or the velvet drapes or the chandeliers that still trembled sometimes in bad weather, for no reason anyone could satisfactorily explain. Prague remembers its dead in the way that very old cities do, not loudly, not with monuments, but in the particular quality of light in certain rooms at certain hours. Vera Kasparova is remembered, if at all in the musical world, as a voice that ended too soon and a career that might have been extraordinary. The opera she was performing the night she died, Otto Kral's Nightingale's Vow, was never performed again. The score was taken into evidence and never returned, and Kral himself died in prison 11 years later, still writing music that no one ever heard. Whether it was any good, no one can say. He wrote to the end. Novotny retired in 1921 and kept his notes from that evening in a leather folder in the bottom drawer of his study desk until his death. He never spoke publicly about the case. He said once to his wife that it was the saddest one he had ever worked, not because of the violence of it, but because of how much love had been involved in getting there. How many different kinds of love, and how each one had gone wrong in a different way. His wife, who was a practical woman, said that was very poetic and that his soup was getting cold. Outside the window, it was raining. It often rains in Prague. The old stones are very good at holding water, and the river, when it rises, rises all at once and takes everything with it, and leaves the city clean and quiet and smelling of something ancient and cold and difficult to name. Sleep well if you can. The rain won't stop for hours yet.